Hi, my name is Derek Ferfero, and today we'll be presenting Team 42 Task Towers DP2. So, as a team, we aim to make Jenga more fun and interactive for all ages by adding presets and tasks that need to be done between each turn. So, we have our black box, and on the left we have the inputs, and on the right we have the outputs. So, the first input is energy, which is from the battery. The second input is the stack of blocks. So the blocks will be stacked on top of a base, and then the on and off signal and the preset selector. And then on the right, we have some of the outputs where we have mode rotation and power to the OLED screen from the battery. And then the fallen blocks. So either when a player messes up or they run out of time, the tower will collapse and all the blocks will fall, which leads to the fallen blocks. And then the on-off signal turns on the Arduino, and the preset selector selects the different game modes that we have. So now we have the concept combination tables, which display the uniqueness and exciting possibilities between each team member. On the top table, we have our original concept combination table, where on the left we have the sub functions such as the power source, destructor, selector, the screen, power selector, top plate connector, starter, presets, and block types. And on the right, we have all the possible solution fragments. So the top table shows all of the fragments that we came up with as a team, and then the bottom table um, disregards some of the solution fragments that we found to be either impractical or too expensive. So the bottom is the narrowed combination table. An example of this is for the block types. We have metal, where metal is just too much money and very heavy. So altogether, that would just not make a good idea. If we had metal towers stacked up, and then once the tower collapsed, it could cause damage to a person or the base that we've made. Another example of that is the app-based for the presets. It is possible and it would be pretty cool, but it's a little impractical considering we can just have the presets on the, the front panel, which would make things easier for the player and us to make the product. And now we go on to our final concept combination table, which highlights the most effective solutions that we came up with as a team. So in red, you have Ben, and green is me, and then yellow is Joe, and blue is Nate. So an example of this, it shows what each team member thought would be the best solution fragment for each subfunction. For example, I chose a lithium ion battery as a power source, motor puller for the destructor, wheel for the selector, OLED screen, buttons for power selector, magnets as top plate connector, comically large button for the starter, and micro SD for the presets. We move on to the 635 method. This was a great way for each team member to generate creative and their foundational ideas. So here I'm displaying my original concept generation. On the left, you have the front view. On the right, you have the side view. The front view shows that I chose the large red button on the front, and then I have the LED screen and wheel and the switch. This is actually a little different than what I chose in my final drawing. I made some changes in between, so it's not exactly as what I had in the concept combination table. Anyway, on the right, you have the wood blocks and the cord, which plugs into the wall. And then here we have some modifications that were made to maintain customer needs and optimize our product's ability. So an example of some changes that were made, we have the slanted view of the section for the on the left, and you can still see the wheel and the button, but on the right, you can see that now storage for the blocks was added where I didn't have that before. And now we move on to the individual sketches for each team member. This was a great way for everybody to demonstrate what they find to be the most effective and best method for what we should pursue for the project. On the left, you have Ben's design. On the right, you have mine. For Ben, you have the four presets as buttons. So you select each button for which preset that you want. an OLED screen, micro SD card reader, start and stop buttons on the top, power switch on the front right, motor pole for the tower destroyer, magnetic connection for the top plate and connected it to the blocks. And then you have block storage in the bottom. And then mine on the right, you have the wheel as the preset selector, micro SD card, and an OLED screen. On and off button on the front, green start and red stop button on the top. You have the top plate, which is the thin part on the top. Storage for the blocks on the bottom. I also use the motor puller as a tower destroyer and magnetic top plate connector and wooden Jenga blocks. On the left, you have Joe's design. On the right, you have Nate's. So Joe also chose buttons as his preset selector, which is similar to Ben's, but instead he had them in a different formation. He had 1, 2, 3, 4 on the left in a square formation. Then you have the LED screen and the start button. And he used the linear actuator as a tower destroyer, wood blocks, the on-off switch on the back right, and then he also had the storage for the battery on the bottom. And finally, we go to Nate's, where he had a wheel to select the presets, micro SD card, LED screen, on and off switch on the front, start and stop button on the top, and he had a drawer, which is different from what everybody else had. Instead of lifting up the top plate and putting the blocks in, you would pull out the drawer and put the blocks in there. And then he also used the linear actuator and the top plate. This is our final design. We aim to make our final design easy to assemble and fun to play and have different presets so people of all ages will enjoy playing this game. So starting from the top down, you have the block plate, which is the top thing, which is where all the blocks go on top of. So that rests on top of the ramp and the tower goes on top of that. And then below that, you have the top plate connector. So on the top plate connector, there's four magnets, one on each corner. The purpose of the top plate connector is to cover and protect all of the machinery that's inside of the base, such as the motor, the Arduino, and the SD card. And then you have the motor, which is number 9. So on the motor, there will be a string that's connected to the block. So when the timer runs out, the motor will spin, which will pull the block that the tower is resting on top of, and then destroy the tower. And then you have the two buttons on the top. The one on the left is for start, the one on the right is stop. The start will be green, and the stop will be red. Then you have the four buttons on the front screen, which selects the different presets. And then you have the OLED screen, and this is overall, this is the entire base, which is what number 2 is. And then this is the where the power switch would go to turn it on and off. And then on the bottom, you have the block storage. The big change that we made from the designs to this design is that instead of having the micro SD card here, which is where most people put it in the drawings, we're going to have it inside because we realized that we won't be needing to switch it out very often and it might be bad to keep it on the front plate. So it's better to just keep it inside away from everything and have it protected by the top plate. So overall, we remain very optimistic as the production of the final prototype progresses. We're excited to make some necessary changes and create the best product that we can while keeping our customers in mind. Thank you.